Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Stephen Johnston. I work for the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And to respect your time, I'm going to go ahead and get us started right at 1 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get a few more people joining us as we go along. Again, this is the spring meeting for the Bacteria Implementation Group, or BIG, just in case I use the acronym BIG, at least know what that is. As this is generally a large group, I won't go and do full introductions for everybody online, although we will go through the BIG roster just to try to make sure that we make quorum, which is 17 for reference. We will review the agenda here in just a moment, but a few quick notes for those, especially those who are here presently in the audience. As you noted, maybe the meeting's being recorded, or if you just joined us, we are recording this for future. Let me step back just in case it's getting feedback. Additionally, if you have questions or comments and you're online, please use the chat feature. It should be off. We checked that earlier. As I say, if you have a question or comment on Zoom for the chat feature, please use that or raise your hand and verify. And Andrea Tantilla, who's a coworker of mine, will be checking the chat routinely and will make me aware if you have any comments or questions. So we'll handle it that way. Regarding safety, just a little safety message for those of us who are in the conference room. I act as your fire warden, so you must respect me, I guess. Anyway, so if there's a fire alarm, we proceed out the glass doors, go to the other side of the elevator and wait there for further announcements over the intercom. Additionally, if you need the restroom and haven't been to the restroom here, pass the glass doors and to the right. That concludes our safety message. Please have a safety message if you're at home or at your own work to think about how you get out of your building or home. With that, we will move on to our agenda for the day. Get it to advance. Hold on, I'm getting the presentation frozen up for a second.
Okay, so let's go to initial presentation. Share, so let's share the share here. And, okay, actually we're switching this over to you.
Bear with us, hold on.
Yeah, we're relying.
That works.
Okay, make sure they can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You probably want to bring it up to.
Testing, testing.
No, I mean, like, that should work too. Just make sure they can hear you.
Need it a little bit louder, Stephen.
Give me feedback that you can hear me.
Turn up the volume, please.
Just turn up the volume, please. How is that?
Say something more. Say something more, please.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
A little bit better, thank you. Better, thank you.
All right, we'll give that a shot. Hopefully it'll take care of the feedback. All right, so we'll walk through the agenda real quick. We will do quorum certification here in just a moment. Once we have certified that we have the appropriate quorum, we will review any changes to the BIG roster, both membership as well as alternates. Then we will review and approve the minutes from the October 26th fall meeting. There'll be a short public comment period. If you're present in the room, feel like you want to mention anything related to the Bacteria Implementation Group, or to if you live in the project area and want to talk about something related to bacteria, feel free to make a comment. If you're online, that applies to you as well. Again, use the chat feature or raise your hand feature to announce that you'd like to make a public comment. We have essentially 6 items on our agenda for today. I'll be reviewing the Iplan update, steps to update the 2013 implementation plan going forward, looking at the 2021 annual report, where we're at and getting that out and approved for this year, and then our progress on the 2022 annual report data collection in preparation for the fall meeting. Item 4 is the TMDL program updates. We have Jimmy Milliken again this year to give us an update from Tarleton State on some TMDLs that are filling in our project area. Item 5 is implementation projects. We have 2 projects that we'll be talking about today, pretty much a program from the Texas Forest Service, as well as some demographic information from HJC. Item 6 is other business, and if you have any meetings or announcements, that's the time for doing that. And hopefully we'll adjourn at 3 o'clock. This is an opportunity for big members to make changes to the agenda. If there's any, please voice those now. I don't see any in the conference room, any online.
There are no hands raised and there's nothing in the chat.
Thank you, Andrea, and we will proceed. All right, so we need to do the quorum. I'm going to say off members' names, and if you are present, Andrea is going to unmute everyone, so that if you're present, please say here. If you're not here, obviously you won't hear me. If you're an alternate for that person, please speak your name and who you're an alternate for. So walking down the list, beginning with Ralph Calvino.
I'm here.
Thank you, Ralph. Jerry Caravitas.
Here.
Jerry. Richard Chapin has retired from the city of Houston, Lambtron alternate. Lambtron on the call. Danielle COC.
This is Danielle.
Thank you, Danielle. Charlotte Cisneros.
I'm here.
Thank you, Charlotte. Christine Cooper.
Here?
Thank you, Christine. Tom Burgess. Thank you, Tom. Colleen Gilbert.
Here.
Thank you, Colleen. T. Karras. And Cassidy will be voting on her for membership. Mac Martin, are you online? Andrew Isbell. Carol Labresh. Michael Lee.
This is John Ellis. I'm in place for Michael Lee.
Great, thank you, John. Kathy McCoy. Paul Nelson.
Paul
Currently
Nelson
alternate.
here.
Thank you, Paul. Paul's currently the alternate. Scott Nichols. Becky Olive.
Sorry, I'm here.
Thank you, Becky. Mitchell Page. Linda Pahacek.
I'm here.
Hi, Linda. Sonia Phillips.
I'm here.
Patrick Reitmeyer. And Jim Robertson. I believe Steve Hupp will be in for Jim. Steve Hupp.
Steve Hupp is stuck in the waiting room.
Okay. I'll partially put in here. Scott Singer. Linda Sheed.
All right, Steve Hupp is here.
One more
Linda's,
time.
Linda's online.
Steve Hupp is here also.
Okay. And did I miss somebody else?
Did you hear that Linda Sheed is online?
Heard you now. Thank you, Linda. Brian Shemetsky.
I'm present.
Thank you, Brian. Shane Simpson. Robert Snoza.
Roberto Vega here as the alternate for Robert.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. Michael Thornhill.
I'm here.
Scott Tuma. Joanna Wilson.
Joe's present.
Thank you, Joe. And any member I did not call one last time?
Marty Hughes is here with Green Fire.
Okay.
Esther Tucky is also here.
Okay. Let me check that one off. That would be for Patrick Reitmeyer. Any other alternate member?
Steve, Camila Biaggi is here with Harris County Engineer.
One more time?
Camila Biaggi.
Okay, thank you, Camilla. So that's, so Rachel, you're not off. It was that I sent emails out and it bounced that you weren't part of CEC and so, or reflective. And so we talked at coordination policy. So that doesn't mean you're off. It's just, we got to figure out what your interest is still and so forth. So not booting you. And no one had the intent at coordination policy to do that. We just were confused.
Yeah, no, so I'm still involved with the CEC. I'm no longer the executive director.
Should go green.
Okay, is it green?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm no longer the executive director at CEC, but I'm still involved.
Okay.
I'm still part of the organization. So I'm hoping to continue, but I'm willing to cede the position to somebody else if they're jumping up and down.
We don't have that. So in fact, the vacancy down there that says conservation, which we're going to talk about, I will plug you back in and you're still official member. We didn't never kick you off. So we have an additional person to account for today. So those that, I don't know if the camera's picking up, Rachel Powers is still a member of the big, was taken off during the coordination policy last time we met, just to give you a background. And it was mainly because of something that happened with the email when I sent out emails. So we have that corrected. Rachel, you're still a member and we're counting you for quorum. And we have quorum, no trouble today. Thank you all. All right, so let's move on to changes in roster unless anybody has any other questions about current big membership. So roster updates for the spring meeting. Again, I mentioned Cassidy Ince will be taking over for the big representing the Texas Forest Service agricultural position. Paul Nelson, representing conservation and the Bayou Preservation Association, will be stepping in as a member of the big. He was the alternate. Alternates changing. Again, Mac Martin, who was the member of the big, is stepping back to be the alternate. And that's mainly because Cassidy is the representative here for the Texas Forest Service in the Houston region. And then Rose Sobel will be stepping in as the Bayou Preservation Association alternate. So with those changes, are there any other additional changes from members of the big that you'd like to make?
Yeah, Brian, is your name, doesn't it start with SCH instead of just SH?
Which one?
Brian
It's
Schmidt.
SA, it's SA.
Do we have that off?
There is no C. There is no C.
It's, yeah, SHMAESSKY. Is that what's wrong with okay, we'll get that. We'll get to there. All
I'm
right,
used to
so
it. I'm used to it.
no worries. So any additional roster changes from the big?
This is Colleen Gilbert with Greens Bayou Coalition. I'd like to add Marty Hughes as an alternate for Greens Bayou.
All right. And that's HUGHES.
Yes.
Perfect. Any other changes to either big members or to the alternate list?
Will Kristen continue to be my alternate?
Who?
Kristen, I'm blanking on her last name, with Bayou City Waterkeeper.
Okay, is she on? She's on here, correct?
Well, she would have been, but
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I've got her in the records. I'll make sure that
Okay.
still reflects that. Okay. All right, any changes in the chat that I missed?
No.
So we're going to move to approval process, just for the sake of doing Zoom. I'll do approvals and
Ms. Fataki has a hand raised.
Oh, can you hear me?
yes.
Patrick Reitmeyer is moved to another section within the organization, and he is no longer being involved with big, and he's actually his replacement for his position is just hired, and he hasn't get situated yet. So for now, I'm still an alternate, but I don't know how you can move forward. I think you need to just remove Patrick Reitmeyer's name from the list.
Okay. To figure out in which direction C is going to go with that.
This model is not wrong. I understand that it's yeah, but you can take
Andy, I don't know if you want to mute everybody. Thank you, Andrea. So as I was saying about the approval process, we will go in the negative in terms of if you have a dissent from the approval, please note that in the chat or raise your hand for that. Additionally, if you want to abstain from voting, you're welcome to abstain as well. Just mention that in the chat too. But first up, we need a motion to approve the 4 that are on the screen, as well as Marty Hughes, who'll be representing the Greens Bayou Coalition under conservation.
I'll make the motion.
Linda Bahacek in the room will make an motion.
Second, Tom Douglas.
Tom Douglas is making a second. Is there any discussion from those in the room as well as those on Zoom? I'm not hearing from Andrea. We'll go for the vote. Is there any abstentions or dissent to making these changes to the roster?
There are no hands raised and there's nothing in the chat.
All right, and there's nothing in here in the room. No one's raising a hand or saying anything. So we will proceed with that vote and the changes to the roster. Thank you. Next up is the review of the summary minutes from October 26th. And Tom has graciously given me a couple of notes regarding some names that for some reason I've had them misspelled for a while and we haven't corrected them. So we'll correct Carol Labreche, making sure we note it's right on the roster, but not here in the agenda. Should be Labreche with an A, L-A. And then Paul Nelson, it should be a Nelson with an O and not an E. We'll correct that.
I was using this to ask about Brian Schmetsky's name a while ago. Here it does have a C, so I guess we ought to strike that.
Yes, we'll have to make that change.
Thank you.
And then there was one other change to approval. If you go to the third page, second full paragraph, this is about the third sentence, the ends in EPA for approval, have the R in there that's missing. So we'll make those changes as well. Are there any other changes to the minutes? Corrections or what have you? I'll give you a minute or two to look through them. All right, I'll make one final call. If you have a change you'd like to have made, please note it now. Anything in the chat, Andrew?
No, no hands raised. No, nothing in the chat.
All right, I guess we'll entertain motion to approve the minutes with those changes to pre-names and an R to approval. Or approved. I think it's actually approved.
Yeah, Tom Douglas, so moved.
And a second?
This is Rachel, I'll second.
Rachel Powers is seconding. Any discussion? None here in the conference room, any online? And we'll entertain either abstentions or dissent to approve those motions. No dissents in the conference room. Anyone online?
There are no hands raised. And there's nothing in the chat.
All right, so the minutes have been approved with those changes to be reflected. All right, moving on to public comment. Again, it's an opportunity, and in practice, it would not be for somebody who's a member of the BIG to make a comment for public comment, but if you're a stakeholder within the big project area or outside of the big project area and you have an interest in a comment related to bacteria in our waters, or something that you'd like the BIG to take up, here's an opportunity for you to make a public comment. Anybody here in the room? I don't have any in here in the room. Anybody online?
I don't see any hands raised and nothing in the chat.
Where's Carl when you need him? All right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 1, Iplan updates. So the Iplan update, we've been in process for a fair amount of time. If you've read the minutes that are there before you, you would have noticed that we talked about this at the last meeting, and our goal was to meet in January and February to actually spend some time reviewing the actual document. So I held off because I thought we were actually going to get in person, which we finally made it in person here at HJC in March. And looking at technology wise, trying to get folks in the room, because reviewing a document online with folks who aren't present is really difficult to gauge where interest lies and if you got questions and all body language and those kinds of things. And so I held off and held off. So we'll talk about the timeline going forward, but we finally I went ahead and had us meet in work groups to review a third time the documents. So we did that in May. We met with the wastewater treatment facility, sanitary sewer system work group, the stormwater work group, the on-site sewage facility and illicit discharge work group, and the animals and agricultural work group to again review the current draft. And so we made a few minor changes there, and I'll talk about those going as we go through the rest of this presentation. So just a quick review of the Iplan format. Essentially, it's the same in terms of the number of actions and activities. So there's still 11 strategies to address bacteria in our waters. So those stayed the same. Within each of the various strategy areas, there's a summary for that strategy, just like the implementation plan in 2013 was. Under the activities themselves, this is where it changes slightly going forward. So each activity, we're putting in an action statement, a focus on what the bacteria implementation group and its partners is going to focus on in that activity area. Additionally, the background section of the activity will really be a place or repository for the 2013 information for that activity. So we pull that forward into the background and we put past tense for each of those background items. It talks about what TCEQ might do. It talks about some of the things that we would do that maybe aren't coming to pass for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that as well when we get into the review of the whole document. Then we pulled metrics and milestones and monitoring. Essentially, we put a 9-element table at the back of all the strategies for folks to look at and kind of tell you when we're going to try to get things accomplished. We want to kind of pull that forward under each of the activities so that we can see kind of where we're trying to go with each of them. And so we're bringing those forward underneath each of the activities. And you'll see that here in just a second. The other part of the process is, we learn new things from 2013 till now. We have new data to look at and have been looking at it as we've gone all along. So we want to fold that kind of information into the document too. So looking at wastewater 1.0, again, it still has 7 activities underneath it for that strategy. It's really, again, how we look at each of them individually. We, of course, have various data to use in the case of service area boundaries for the region. 64% of our project area has a conventional centralized wastewater. Roughly about 289,000 acres is under some kind of centralized wastewater. We access the discharge monitoring ports, those I'm not sure what's happening there. The discharge monitoring ports, those are the reports that each wastewater treatment facility reports on for themselves. And so we review those for progress related to either their sampling regime, how much in terms of compliance. In the case of this table here, we're looking at the information from 2012 to 2019. We're in process now, and we'll talk about that under the 2022 annual report. We're in process of getting those other 2 years for the discharge monitoring report. If you look at it, the main thing that's really in terms of major change here is obviously there's more monitoring being done, more wastewater treatment facilities are permitted in our watershed. And so we have more data to look at, but not necessarily whether it's regarding compliance and improvement per se. Certainly from the geomean perspective, when you look at the data averaged together for each of these plants, they haven't really improved or got worse over time. If 98.8% versus 99.3% is much of a change. Can't really say much there. Under the grab max limit, we saw maybe a little bit of improvement since 2012. Again, 93 to essentially 97 or 98% could be considered a little bit of improvement. But again, it really was just waiting time for the permits to get processed and folks getting used to collecting bacteria samples and the like. Again, wastewater treatment facilities changing over time. The main thing here is that those less than 100,000 gallons moved from essentially 43% back in 2013 to where it's currently sitting at just under 25%. And most of those filtered into the other categories. So that's also due to growth in the number of wastewater treatment facilities too. Looking at permitted flow, as most would probably figure, City of Houston has the lion's share of a lot of the larger plants in the region, but that also includes those older cities, those along I-45 corridor, whether it's all the way down in Pasadena or up into Conroe or Woodlands. Those are the larger plants. Since the 70s with the municipal utility districts, we've put on a lot more of those smaller plants that are out there. Certainly we're able to map it, which we didn't do the first go around. Looking at it from percent exceedances from 2013 to 2020, we're seeing that over that time frame, certainly some plants do have some challenges in meeting. If you look at the amount of the data there, so some are 10% or greater, and it doesn't matter where you're located. It could be throughout our region. And so that's important for us when it comes to targeting certain plants for potential outreach going forward. So I just want to give you a sample of one of the changes related to wastewater, in this case 1.3 enhanced wastewater treatment facility compliance. You know, that previous table or previous map showing where we have maybe a potential wastewater treatment facility having difficulty meeting its permit. And so we want to maybe target that the plant for future work. And so working with some of the trade organizations, identify those underperforming plants and offering technical workshops each year and trying to encourage those plant operators to participate in those workshops. So the metrics that we use for this one are the DMR data as well as the Harris County Pollution Control compliance data. We use that again to identify what plants are out there that have challenges. Again, we offer a technical workshop each year, whether it's the Clean Waters Initiative or some other situation. Any trouble with the click share, or is it still going through? Okay. And then offering the monitoring component to this, again, the number of targeted outreach opportunities, the individual wastewater treatment facilities that participate in those educational opportunities each year. And then an environmental goal, looking at the CRP data or changes in AU impairment status over the long haul. Sanitary sewer systems, again, we didn't change any of the number of activities under sanitary sewer system 2.0. Looking at sanitary sewer overflows and where they happen in our project area, generally in the older parts of the region, City of Houston, even down into Pasadena, those older infrastructure typically have the greatest number of SSOs over time. That said, as those MUDs get older and age older, you know, we might see that happen to move into the other parts of the watershed, so we want to be careful with that. Yearly average is about a little over 1,000 sanitary sewer overflows and about 4.6 million gallons released annually. So just looking at, again, one of those activities, to address fat soils, grease, and we added wipes to this one. We want to assess the number of fat soil grease programs via municipal separate storm sewer systems. So reviewing those municipalities that have phase 2 requirements, are they offering some kind of outreach targeting fat soil and grease and wipes? Connecting them, if not, to various programs that are already out there for that. And then part of the wastewater treatment facility technical workshop, including addressing sanitary sewer overflows, whether it's fat soil and grease or some other component of sanitary sewer overflows. Again, milestones, number of residents reached per year, number of MS4s reporting per year, what's happening with those, as well as the workshop that's held every year. And likewise, report metric, again, reporting on those things, as well as the number reached. And then finally, the CRP analysis and change in AU impairment status. On-site sewage facilities, no real change to this one. Just looking at the on-site sewage facilities in the region, there are about 50,000 permitted ones that we found, about 107,000 non-registered. That number is going to change. We're actually changing the process for identifying non-registered OSSFs, moving from partial data over to 911 data. And you've had presentations we presented to the OSSF work group on that change to 911 addresses. And we'll present that to you all when it's finalized, probably in October with that change. That said, we reached out to Grimes County and we're able to get their 911 addresses. So we'll be taking the service area boundaries for wastewater. And again, if your 911 address falls outside of that boundary, we're considering you likely have some personal wastewater treatment, hopefully, on your property. And that's one way we're getting at the non-registered there. Still trying to do some outreach to San Jacinto County to do likewise, but that's why there are 2 bare spots up on our project area that we're trying to address. And just for grins, of those 150,000, if you do a 19% failure rate, that's about 30,000 failing systems possibly in a region, about 300 million if you do about $10,000 per repair per OSSF. Again, that's gradation, whether you're actually replacing it or you're just doing a pump out. It's about 300 million that we would need to address those. And then just looking at one of the various activities, 3.1, identify and address failing systems. Again, prepare a regional plan. That was in the 2013. I don't think we ever developed a regional plan. So now we're going to put that in here and have a timeline set for developing regional plans. So that regional plan would take in the authorized agents and have us sit down with them and begin figuring out where we want to focus and doing a geographic prioritization, whether it's income levels or it's impaired AU status in terms of concentration. Do those kinds of things and actually prepare a regional plan for us going forward to hopefully take and maybe find a way to get that $300 million needed. Mapping OSSFs, again, we are already doing that just so that we have an annual update each year on that. Hopefully 2 years, and looking over at Jessie, she's the one that helps manage the mapping component. 2 years, maybe hopefully get San Jacinto in line. So number of OSSFs pumped, that's another milestone per year, tracking those pump out, repaired, replaced, and abandoned. And then again, that regional plan, setting that for year 3, and then implementing years 4 through 10. Go ahead.
When you say prepare regional plan, is that how to inspect the ones that maybe aren't permitted?
So good point of clarification. So I am envisioning that regional plan as being how we go about and identify where we're going to focus our dollars. Because if, currently the way our SEP works, we've got a list of folks that are interested in having their OSSF repaired or pumped out, but it's throughout the 13 counties of HJC. It's not in our project area. And unless we actually develop a plan that says, okay, based on these metrics, like income level, maybe impairment status of the AU, we are just going to be continuing doing it willy-nilly. And I'd rather us figure out, okay, we want to focus on this 1,000 that are right here because they're grouped and it's whatever reason, then, be spread out. Good question, though. Just a reminder, if you've got questions and you're on Zoom, use the chat and Andrea will nicely interrupt me and make sure that we get your question answered. And so then finally, again, just the monitoring components, bringing those into the document. Stormwater, again, no major changes here, just some minor language changes that maybe involve different parts where we're encouraging rather than relying on certain organizations to do certain things. Just looking at the census designated urbanized area for our region. This is 2010 data. We don't have the 2020 urbanized area out yet. Hopefully that'll come out in the next year. But currently, based on the 2010 census for phase 2 permits, roughly the area should be about 880,000 acres, or about 42% of our project area. And again, that's important for folks because phase 2 requirements often say, or they should say in the permit, that how they're going to address an impaired water body that comes through their territory or jurisdiction. And so that's an opportunity for us to provide outreach and education to those phase 2s, but also for the phase 2s to participate and be invited to participate in our program because it's part of their reporting process. They should be able to say they participate with the bacteria implementation group. Here's the things that we do, and be able to document that in their report. So again, just knowing that they're out there and participating, and that's kind of our growth area should be to focus on the phase 2s going forward. And then HJC has been maintaining a web site for various low impact development or green infrastructure practices being put in place in our region to highlight those. There's about 70 or so in the big project area. And so we want to continue to have that available as part of the metrics we use for this strategy area. So just looking at 4.2 model practices, again, update that low impact development green infrastructure tracker, looking at the WISE awards, the Water Innovation Strategies and Excellence Awards, again, trying to highlight those projects out there that are doing a valuable service in terms of removing bacteria, and then holding a stormwater workshop annually, again, to really focus on the work that everybody's doing, but also provide outreach and education to other entities out there. We talked a little bit about these workshops being maybe a little bit even larger than the CWI traditionally is. CWI is typically a 2-hour, maybe 4 presentation type thing, but maybe doing a little bit larger type workshop in the future. And again, annually doing those 3 different tasks. Construction only has one activity, encouraging increased compliance and enforcement through their stormwater permits. Again, that's tied to that phase 2 permit that each of those entities have. What we're using for a metric here is the development pressure. And again, this is using population. HJC projects out population growth into the future, and then looking at where those potential folks will land, whether it's commercial or it's residential infrastructure. And so we can use this kind of planning tool to help us where we want to go forward with our phase 2 and discussions with those entities. Hey, you're a phase 2 or going to be a phase 2. You might consider these things for your construction permits. And again, workshops, meetings, and events targeted at phase 2s. And then just, again, tracking those over time. Illicit discharges. This one had 4, which we originally 3 in the 2013 report. We added a 4th one when we added Jarbo Bayou and Clear Creek and Clear Lake. I'm sorry. When Jarbo drains into Clear Lake and there's boaters in there, and so trying to address boater waste as part of this. It also helps out with Lake Houston. We'll try to mimic some of the things that are already ongoing with the Galveston Bay Foundation to maybe help out with Lake Houston too. So the examples for this is outreach events and pump outs for 6.4 for boater waste. Again, Galveston Bay Foundation already has a seasoned program already doing a lot of this work, and it's really for us to track what they're doing, but also see where we might be able to assist them. Again, I usually comment about implementation plans as well as watershed protection plans. If you're trying to seek grant funding, particularly from the state or federal government, if you have a plan such as a watershed protection plan or implementation plan, you can use that as an assistance in getting extra points typically for those types of grant programs. So milestone is again an annual report on what the Galveston Bay Foundation is doing, and if we're doing anything to help them out. Uh, 7.0 agriculture and animals was originally the 2013. We added silviculture when we added the East Fork and the large area of silviculture practices there. You're going to hear later today from Cassidy Eames from Texas Forest Service, going to actually talk about those programs, not just rural programs, but also urban programs. So I think we're going to be adding some value, bringing in the Forest Service for local, both urban and rural. So we beefed up 7 to include silviculture. Just some real quick land cover stats. The area has about 25% of it in forest or shrubs, 18% pasture and grasslands, cultivated crops 1%, and wetlands about 8%. If you look at the change from 2011 to 2019, there's been a decrease in forest and shrubs by 3%, pasture grasslands by 1%, crops 2%, and wetlands 1%. And you can probably imagine where that went. Development low, about 11% growth, and development medium 2% growth over that time. We also look at feral hogs with this strategy area and addressing those. I didn't put all the watersheds on here. One of the other things that I wanted to mention about the Iplan and changes to the Iplan is to look at, in general, look at all the watersheds as sub-watersheds to the big project area. And so taking our data and trying to drill it down at least to the segment level, if not even down to the assessment level that TCQ uses, so that a lot of our partners can use that information for their water body, whether it's the Greens Bayou Coalition or the Bayou Preservation Association or one of our stakeholder groups. You can actually look and see what those numbers are, particularly for your water body of interest. So you don't have the whole list on here. If you do the whole list and you take it all the way down, there's about 36,000 estimated feral hogs in our region. Yes.
Just trying to figure out high quality and low quality. Is that
So-
feral hog quality or?
So the way, and Tom probably will jump in here if I get things wrong, because he's been tracking with all of our water protection plans. So the way we look at it is there's a number estimate for high quality habitat for feral hogs. So if you're like a wetland, forest, you know, some native property, it's going to be high quality. And so that's roughly about 16 feral hogs per acre. I think that's what it is. And then if it's in lower quality, so like barren lands, lands that have been disturbed, cropland, those kinds of things, then it's a lower rate of about 8 per acre. And so then you use those two numbers to look at, you know, multiplying it times how much you've got of that acreage versus the other acreage, and then you average that together.
Yeah, it really would help to indicate what the units are for those numbers in those columns, because it is kind of mysterious as it is.
Okay, yeah, certainly I'll make sure that's in the case for the Iplan, but yes. Does that make sense? No, we're not talking about bacon. And just looking at, again, one example, 7.1, promote increased participation in existing programs. Again, a lot of our ag agencies are already doing this stuff. It's not, I'm certainly not a specialist with regards to that area. So we really rely on Texas State Soil Water Conservation Board, National Resource Conservation Service, our local ag agents for their programs. And so it's really tracking what they're doing already and how we might help them in doing that. I gave the example of the clean water grows on trees. So it's one of those outreach education things that the Texas Forest Service is doing. And so we just try to track those types of programs every year, and you can just check and see what's happening. Yeah, it's hard to see that. I'm sorry. Residential, there's only one activity, expand homeowner education efforts throughout the big project area. It didn't really change. again, it's really, there's a lot of nonprofits and city governments that are doing a lot of this. HJC has some of its own education programs. So it's really tracking those programs, finding areas where we can maybe increase funding to this region. Things like the Free Texas Litter program that we have, and other things, looking for those types of opportunities to bring, again, eyeballs onto waste and how waste is handled in various cases. And then report on that in the annual report going forward. Monitoring and Iplan revisions. Again, nothing's really changed here with regards to the activities, pretty much stayed the same. Again, we base a lot of our monitoring efforts for the region on what the state ends up using for bacteria, clean rivers program monitoring stations and TCQ stations within our region, and then assessing that information along with the integrated report that happens every 2 years with TCQ. We have about 200 stations plus in our area, certainly one of the more heavily monitored areas in the state of Texas, if not nationally. Just looking at 9.4, assess, monitor results, and modify the Iplan. Again, this is really just based on what we're doing right now, trying to evaluate whether the Iplan needs to be modified and how we would go about modifying it, along with the annual report that's produced every year, and making sure that happens. The research didn't change, at least based on the work group that met last year. Again, same 4 topical areas. The big one, looking at stormwater activities, looking at those practices that are put in place in our region and doing some effectiveness studies and determining what value is out there that we should be promulgating, highlighting, and making sure other locations do that as well. And so part of that effort is to do that and produce our annual report and highlight those and put a spotlight on those projects that are doing that kind of thing. Programmatic monitoring, report on studies, and then environmental, just again, clean rivers program analysis and change. And now we're finally getting through 11, the final strategy, Geographic Framework. This was the basis in 2013 was on a lot on AU status, on concentration of bacteria, and those kinds of things. We're going to add in social and economic considerations as well. And in one of the presentations today, you'll hear from HJC talk a little bit about that and how you can actually access our data and make it for yourselves, useful for yourselves too. So we'll do that. One of the things we've done in the past is the targeted monitoring. I just threw up one of the slides there for the graphic where we again use concentration of bacteria to kind of decide, hey, where we want to go and do a better study and see what's happening. And so we've done that over several years. Biopreservation Association has done that as well. We're going to continue to try to do that going forward. I know TMDL program has provided funds to do that in 2023. So we'll be doing starting the program up again in 2023. So just to go into the timeline where we're at. So I'll pull the document together and we're going to look at the whole document in July. We're going to invite folks to be here in attendance. I'm going to encourage participation by the big to come in person, just so that we can have copies, kill a few trees, unfortunately, but actually go through it and walk through it and get some comments in. Again, I just think it works better for us to really see each other and read this thing together and feel like we're all roughly on the same page. Take your review and comments that day, and then over the next month, give you an opportunity to really sit down with the document and get the additional comments that come to you as you spend some time looking at it. So then pull you back in August, towards the end of August, again, try to give you a full month to really look at the document. And at that point, go through any of the big major comments or edits that have come through to make you all feel comfortable with it. I'll get that revised document then out to the all big members to get a chance for y'all to get a chance to review it for about a month before October. And hopefully get our chance for October vote on the implementation document. Before we step into the annual report, I want to give you a chance to make comments or questions regarding either the timeline or what I reviewed with regards to each of the action strategy areas. Any comments here? In the conference room? Yes, Rachel.
This looks great. I'm excited to see how this progresses.
Thank you. Any comments online?
I had one comment from Linda Sheed, noting about the column labels with the explanations that I think you addressed in the room, but just to make sure that that was seconded.
Yes, we'll definitely make sure that that table with the feral hogs, we'll definitely have the units and measure and how it's calculated, and make sure that folks understand how that was done. Anything else before we step into the 2021 annual report? All right, so looking at the 2021 annual report, again, for purposes, folks who might not be familiar with it, the 2021 annual report tracks implementation that was carried out in the calendar year 2020. We typically have roughly about 4 success stories to report on and 3 big ideas, as well as implementation progress. This one, again, got kind of caught up in the idea of trying to get folks together to look at the document itself. So it got pushed back a little bit. So we met in the work groups in May. There's a couple of changes that folks wanted to add some additional information into the report. And so we're waiting on that information to get in. I should have that in this week from all those various parts. So I will get that out to you all, and we'll talk about that timeline here in a second. So again, focus on the 2020 calendar year. Just some quick items of notes. Again, part of the reason for the implementation plan update is to address a little bit of maybe stagnation in our decline or reduction of bacteria in our watershed. So we want to figure out why it's kind of stagnating and maybe look at where we should put more emphasis on. And I guess this goes back to my mentioning of the phase 2s and trying to work with phase 2s to incorporate more of those BMPs within their permit. And as they're growing and developing, making sure that those things are happening too. And for those that want to see all the parts that go into the trend line, kind of had this on for folks, but it's a little bit messy. That very top solid line is the 2013 project area. Again, we went through a couple of times where we expanded to different project areas. So we expanded our project area for different watersheds that came through the TMDL program. That blue line that's next down below it, that's the expanded big project area. So that takes in Armand Bayou, it takes in Jarbo Bayou, it takes in the east and west fork of the San Jacinto River TMDL when we brought those into the big. And then you have those subsequent lines below that, but so covering various expanded areas and what their trend is doing. Finally, the red line is the standard, and some of you might be going, well, isn't the standard 126 or is the standard 35? And so we had to put both of them on here. We essentially divided everything by the standard itself. So if you were a water body that's freshwater and it's 126, we divided your geometric mean by the 126. If you're in salt water, we did likewise by 35. And so that allows us to put everything here on one graph. Any questions before I move on? All right, so other, what was that? Any in the chat?
Yes, Linda Sheet had a comment. Said, realizing I'm limited in ability to follow the meeting on her phone, has there been any discussion on the impacts of consent decree?
I don't think the big is taking up the question of consent decree, and I'm assuming she's talking about the city of Houston's consent decree with EPA and TCQ.
Just to add to that, there's also, looks like legal proceedings against the city of Baytown for sanitary sewer overflows. But
That'd be of note too, and I'll let Justin know as well. He's the one that monitors the Cedar Bayou
Yes, I was talking about, this is Linda, I was talking about the city of Houston consent decree, about what progress might be made. We need to be tracking what's agreed to in the consent decree and what results we're seeing.
Right, I think, that may be something that we get and focus on. I know the water keepers has their own look at the SSOs. I mentioned that because I saw that recently. So yeah, I think certainly we want to look at that going forward. And I'd be happy for us to have either a big or a coordination policy. We want to have a discussion a little bit more about that and what data we want to make sure we're using. The data, just to let folks know, the SSO data that we get from the city of Houston is generally far better than some of the SSO data we get from other jurisdictions, partially because of the consent decree, but in general, the other SSO information, it's a little bit more difficult to tease out things. So I think, we can particularly look at the SSO data we get from the city of Houston and maybe talk about that discussion a little bit more.
This is Linda again. One would hope that the consent decree is going to result in a change in the direction and shape of that curve.
I don't disagree. I would hope that would happen too.
There's a question in the chat about CRP outside of the project area.
Sure.
Desta
So
talking.
so Desta, we just to put up here on the graph. So this would be all of the CRP data points that are collected outside of the big project area to kind of give a reference point. So you're looking at, the reference being generally below the standard for areas outside of our project area. It's a big generality. Obviously, there are probably individual watersheds that maybe don't meet the standard. We have TMDLs for those too. All right, if there's no other questions, just looking at wastewater treatment facilities in the big project area and the numbers. Again, if you look at, and it's isolated in the time frame from when we pulled this, I think it's 2020 data. So the permittees and the TCQ outfall data layer are 690. Again, that can change over time. When we look at what's in the EPA registry, there's 686. So a lot of that could be just differences in when permits come through and approved, but roughly they're in the same ballpark. Those submitting DMR data of any type, 548. Those that have bacteria in their DMRs, discharge monitoring reports, there's 28. When we break out those 528, there's 510 that are domestic, and there's another 18 that are industrial. Just looking at the compliance data, again, nothing's too off here. You'd expect, again, we're roughly about 99% compliance, whether it be a metric mean, a little less than so for the grab sample going forward. So generally based on at least the self-reporting data, they're doing fine. Looking at sanitary sewer overflows, again, it's hard to tease out a lot of this information just because various different reporting organizations report things a little bit differently, and they're all done by different eyes on the different inspectors. And so you'll see differences here. But generally, again, we typically see roots and blockages being the biggest concern in our region. We did have a problem. Again, we're still trying to filter through what Bill Hoffman did when he was doing it to make sure our SAS code works out. So we're still working with that data. Hopefully this next go around we'll have a little bit better data and those unknowns won't be quite so big, which is a little bit concerning. So just in general, what we'll do is based on, again, we'll bring the document after the spring meeting here in May, send it out to the big and have it give you all a chance to review and comment, bring you back in July with that other meeting tied to the Iplan update with any comments that you've given me since you've had a chance to look at the document. And we'll then proceed to have a probably reach out to y'all via Zoom and have a meeting to have you do the formal approval process and get the 2021 annual report off the deck. Any comments to that timeline? Any comments in the chat?
No comments in the chat and no hands raised.
Okay. You're almost done with me talking. You guys are excited about that. So the 2022 annual report, again, this is covering the calendar year 2021. We're in the process of gathering information. I made requests during the work group meetings for attendees to start sending in any information that regards that time frame. We are still analyzing the DMR, SSO, and on-site sewage facility and that information for this report. So again, collecting partner data and looking for success stories. So I already kind of have on our list targeted monitoring projects that were completed during 2021. So we both had Bayou Preservation Association targeted monitoring project, as well as one through the CRP. So report on those. Thinking maybe the Galveston Bay Foundation. I guess I should be on the right slide. There we go. Sorry about that. So we'll also be reporting on maybe the Galveston Bay Foundation's rain barrel program. They've been doing it for many years now. And a potential success story. Harris County Flood Control District mentioned floatable wetlands they're using as a test for some of their detention basins. And so we'll usually reach out to them and talk to them about having that as a success story, if it is indeed a success story. For this year, it'll probably be the last year we use the current format for the annual report. We'll change over as we change to the revised Iplan in the next report period. And so this will be the last time it kind of looks the way it has been for the past few years. So again, June, July, collecting implementation information from y'all. In August, we'll start bringing the draft to you at the coordination and policy meeting. Again, just a refresher for folks that may not be familiar with the coordination policy work group. It really is members that are invited from the big as well as their alternates to attend that work group meeting. So we'll have you all come in August and look at the draft and then provide some comments and then have it again, hopefully one final look in October and have a vote at the October fall meeting. Tom?
Were we beginning to get better data on the location of SSOs? It's where the SSO occurs may be a long ways away from where the actual outfall is for the system.
So
Does that apply to this year, or does that come later?
So we're still somewhat at the mercy of the way the data is collected. And so it's still currently, if you have an SSO, you report that SSO to Region 12 for our region. And so it's there's not a standardized format. And so it often comes in different ways to Region 12, and then they compile it and look at it. And so oftentimes that information, we have to spend a lot of time trying to tease out, well, if it's a blockage, why was it a blockage? Sometimes it says, like for instance, sometimes it says I rainfall causing the overflow. But if you go look at the details, it said a blockage, and it may be infrastructure failure, or maybe because of fat soil and grease, but you have to parse it out. And so it's somewhat difficult to do.
Yeah, I was just referring to the physical, the lat long, the geographical location of where it happened. So whatever the cause was, at least where it was.
That is one of the missing pieces. It's you oftentimes don't get a specific lat long. It may be an address, maybe the intersection. And it's hard to actually place that SSO, as we're looking at getting down to an AU level assessment unit level type of assessment. It's hard to place it specifically to there because a wastewater treatment facility might have a huge service area that crosses over different watersheds. And so that can be a challenge. So we're still working on that one. Danielle gave me some bad information at the coordination policy meeting. We're kind of hoping that the electronic reporting rule, which had been pushed back several times. We thought it was going to be December 23rd. Now it's December 2025. And hoping that the electronic reporting rule will pull in the sanitary sewer overflows too as a process, but we'll see. Any other questions regarding the 2022 annual report? All right. So now you get to have someone else talk to you for a second or two. Before we move to Jamie Milliken with the Tarleton State, his presentation, I did want to give Nicole Reed a chance to speak for the TMDL program. She's our project manager for this region. I just wanted to at least introduce herself and let y'all know it's the first time she's been face to face with the big here, at least in the conference room. Go ahead, Nicole.
All right. I'm Nicole Reed. I've actually been the project manager for the TCQ Total Maximum Daily Load program for going on 3 years. But like Steve said, it's my first time actually making it to a meeting. So happy to be here. It's good to be back, to be honest.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, as I mentioned, Jimmy Milliken with Tarleton State University will be giving you a presentation on TMDLs. Again, as we have TMDLs for various assessment units within our project area come up, we typically fill that in as part of the implementation plan. It just becomes incorporated. And the state actually has a process for adding new TMDLs within a area that has a current implementation plan. So Jimmy, if you go ahead and take off.
Okay. I'm getting some feedback. Today I'm going to be presenting information regarding TIER's assistance to TCQ in developing a bacteria TMDL on Water Creek. Hopefully my screen's sharing.
We don't have your presentation, Jimmy.
Okay.
We can't hear you. There it goes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll be presenting information regarding TIER's involvement in the development of a bacteria TMDL on White Oak Creek. It's a project that we're assisting TCQ with. It's going to be an addendum project, so it'll be added to an already existing TMDL in the Lake Houston watershed. Project manager for this at TCQ is Jason Leifester, and I'm the project manager here on this. Todd Adams also with me today, and he's the one that actually put together the technical support document, which is the main task for TIER on this project. So again, the agency lead is TCQ with support funding through the EPA. The topics I'll cover pretty briefly are the previously completed TMDLs that White Oak will be added to, and then give an overview and status of the White Oak TMDL project. So in 2016, there were 7 TMDLs adopted by TCQ and approved by EPA in the Lake Houston watershed. Those assessment units were in Lake Houston, East and Westport, San Jacinto, and Crystal Creek. Then a couple of years later, TCQ added Mound Creek as addendum 1 to those original 7 TMDLs, and that was approved in 2019 by EPA. This is a watershed map of the Lake Houston watershed. The shaded green areas show where the now 8 approved TMDLs are located. And then towards the center here, this is the White Oak Creek watershed. That's one we're currently working on, and it will become a part of the TMDLs associated with all this green shaded area once approved. So again, this will be addendum 2. Addendum 1 was for Mound Creek. Addendum 2 will be White Oak Creek, and will be added to the 7 original TMDLs. The segment number for this is 1004J, Assessment Unit 1. An approach to be used to develop the TMDL will be the flow duration curve, load duration curve approach. And that's the same approach that's been used on the previously approved TMDLs. So this is just another watershed map of White Oak Creek. You'll notice it's formed by the confluence of the West Fork and East Fork of White Oak and forms White Oak. And then White Oak drains down into the West Fork of the San Jacinto River. This is just a closer view showing the location of the TCQ monitoring station. This is where all the bacteria data has been collected for White Oak Creek that's later been determined to be in non-support of the contact recreation use criteria. This is just a picture taken about a month or so ago at that sampling station, just showing what the stream actually looks like. And it's, basically a sandy substrate, clear flowing water body. Looking at data that can be found in the integrated report, going back to the 2016 integrated report, you can see geometric mean values have been very high, well above that 126 criterion. But of note, 2016 and 2018 and 2008, the number of samples available were insufficient to actually get the White Oak Creek watershed listed on the 303D list. In 2020, there was a sufficient number of samples available to list White Oak Creek on 303D list. So 2020 is when it was first placed on the list. And then the draft 2022 integrated report continues to have White Oak Creek on it. And again, just historically, all the values are well above the geometric mean criterion. So that's why the TMDL is being developed. The key features within the watersheds, what I'll go over now, and a lot of these have to do with what's going to be, what will be found in the technical support document once that's developed.
Yeah, we're still having a hard time hearing you, Jimmy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep getting feedback on my end. That's why it's, I'm not sure what's going on.
You might go a couple of slides to the
Go
table.
back.
Yeah, like 2 slides to the table where you're talking about geometric mean.
Oh,
like
okay.
The last part of the
Yeah, I was getting lots of feedback on that one. So looking at the integrated report years here and the data that's included for White Oak Creek in those years, 2016 and 2018, both had White Oak Creek listed in it as a concern because there wasn't enough samples available to assess to put it White Oak Creek on the 303D list at that time. But in 2020, there was a sufficient number of samples available to place White Oak Creek on the 303D list. So 2020 is when it was first placed on the 303D, and then that continues into the draft 2022 integrated report. And you'll notice in the right column, the geometric mean values are all well above the 126 criterion. So that's why the TMDL is being developed now. So looking at key features in the watershed, and these are mainly things that'll be found in the technical support document. One of the things we look at are regulated and non-regulated potential sources of impairment. And for this watershed, there is one wastewater treatment facility, which would be kind of classified as a regulated source of impairment. or potential regulated source of impairment. That's the City of Panorama Village's wastewater treatment facility. It's a 0.4 MGD permitted facility. So this wastewater treatment facility will be accounted for in the TMDL calculations, along with the future growth component of the TMDL calculations. Another potential regulated source of impairment.
Lost you again, Jimmy.
You
I don't know if
lost
it's
my
on our
audio.
side.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Because the transcript's picking it up, but it's just not coming through our. Okay,
I
we're
think
going to
the-
refresh our share, Jimmy. Hold on for a second.
Okay.
Think-
It's on there.
I think you still have us muted. Showing mute on here. Okay. I got it. All right, I think we're back. Jimmy, if you want to continue. Sorry about the delay.
Okay. Do you want me just to start from here or?
Yeah, just go. That's
Okay,
perfect.
well, let me see where, okay. Yeah, so I just mentioned that we were looking at regulated potential sources of bacteria impairment and non-regulated, and another regulated in addition to the wastewater treatment facility would be the regulated stormwater component. And for this particular watershed, there's a significant area that falls within the 2010 urbanized area, which also coincides with MS4 regulated areas. For this watershed, there's 2,888 acres that fall under MS4 regulation. And in addition to that, within the watershed, but outside of that urbanized area, there's an additional 281 acres regulated by construction stormwater permits. So the combination of those two equals about 57.2% of the total drainage area that'll be under stormwater regulation. So that percentage is what we'll use when we go when we're doing the TMDL calculations and actually allocating out portions of the TMDL loading to regulated stormwater. This map just shows where that urbanized area lies over the White Oak Creek watershed, and you can see that roughly a little over half of it's covered by an urbanized area. And then, as I mentioned earlier, additionally outside of this urbanized area, but within the watershed, there's some construction stormwater permits we found that will also be included in our calculations. Population data will be included within the technical support document. We use that as part of the future growth component in calculating that, along with a few other things such as pet estimations, dog and cat numbers, things like that. This particular map is a population density map. So you can see most of the watersheds not that densely populated, the lighter green areas. But there are some more densely populated areas in the northeast portion of the watershed and the southeast that correspond to the city of Conroe and Panorama Village. Land use will be included in our document. For White Oak Creek, the predominant land use is evergreen forest and then some level of developed land cover ranging from open space to developed high intensity, which also corresponds largely with those areas that are more densely populated. Another potential source are on-site sewage facilities. Based on data we received from HJC, there's 299 OSSFs within White Oak Creek. These do not receive any type of load allocation or any type of estimate as to how much they are contributing to impairment, if any at all. They're just, since they are present in the watershed, they will be listed in the document as a potential source of impairment. The last map I have just shows where we're getting our stream flow record from. Since, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using the flow duration curve approach, which relies really solely on having multiple years of daily stream flow data. White Oak Creek is typical of many streams in Texas, or most streams in Texas, in that there's not a gauging station located on it. So we didn't have a stream flow record to utilize directly from the stream. But as that's often the case, what we do instead is use a surrogate watershed. And in this case, there is one fairly close by, just south of the watershed on Bear Branch, where this USGS gauge is located. So we'll take that daily stream flow record, apply a drainage area ratio to it by just dividing the drainage area of White Oak Creek by the drainage area of Bear Branch, and then applying that ratio to the daily stream flow record to get it down to something more suitable for a watershed the size of White Oak Creek. So the status of the TMDL development, the technical support document's scheduled to be completed by the end of August of this year. Once it is, the TCEQ will place it on their website and notify BIG when it's available for public review and comment. And then TCEQ will use that TSD to develop an addendum to be included in the water quality management plan update. And again, this addendum will be addendum number 2 to the original 7 TMDLs. So, questions?
All right, thank you, Jimmy. Any questions for Jimmy regarding updated TMDL that's ongoing in our watershed? Andrea, looks like we have some comments.
All of the comments were saying that we could hear Jimmy when you couldn't, so we don't have any new comments since he got back online.
All right, well, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, thank you.
All right, let me pull up the start of the presentation again. Well, you know what, we're going to have a couple folks who are going to be talking. Rather than pull up my screen, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Pramod. Pramod Samdidi is with our forecast group. Now it's actually being turned into our analytics group department. We're moving them around a little bit. So Pramod is going to be talking about our some regional demographics and how, if you're a member of the BIG and are interested in the project area or a particular watershed, he's going to talk about how to do that. Go ahead, Pramod.
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, thank you, Stephen. Can you all hear me?
And sorry about that, Pramod. I accidentally muted you. My bad.
Oh, okay. That's all right. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pramod Samdidi. I'm with the Data Analytics and Research Department at the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And Stephen has asked me to kind of share some of the tools we have, especially the tool features. So I'm just going to go over the population demographic tool we have. So here is the HJC website, and I'll show how you can get to the tools page. So if you go down, click on the GIS imagery, online tools, and then click on the interactive web applications. And then you'll see our tools page. So we have several interactive web mapping tools covering most of the data that Stephen has shared in his presentation, like land cover, OSSF data, and population data, and a lot of other stuff. So all these the data and tools are available on this page, and they are all sorted by certain keywords like census. So if you're interested in census, you can click on census, or if you're interested in water quality, you can click on water quality, and likewise. So again, all this information is free and available to everyone, and you don't have to have a GIS experience. You can, just like browsing a web, you can browse these tools and play with them. So let me click on the census, and I'm going to go over the latest census data. That is the decennial census 2020 demographic data. It's a mainly redistricting data. So this is actual population counts, and more detailed information will be released by census, I think next year. But right now what we have is we have a population count, we have information on race and ethnicity, and as well as group quarter population. So this is a story map. I'm not going to go over the story map, but I'm going to go over to the demographic snapshot here. And here, the data is available for various geographies, including counties, cities, independent school districts, congressional districts, Senate and House districts, and voting districts, and tracts. So here is the 13 county Houston-Galveston region. And as you can see, 2020 population for our region is 7.3 million. And if you look at the historic data, you can see that our region is adding around 1.2 million people every decade. From 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2020. And you can also look at information on housing units, group quarter, and voting age population. And here we have a breakdown by race. So you can click on or hover over this map and look at the population by race. And we also have historical change in race and by population and population over 18 years. And we also, right now, we don't have more breakdown by age. We only have the voter age population. But if there is another tool, it's called Regional Demographic Snapshot, which uses American Community Survey, which has more detailed information that breaks down demographic data by age, by language spoken, by income, and a lot of other stuff. So I'll just quickly show that later once I'm done with this one. So again, the data is available at various geographies, and if you click on, for example, census tracts, it will take a little time to load. And as you can see, so once you zoom in to a particular census tract, the data will update it. So basically, it's showing data for this particular area. So this area here has a population of 3.3 million. And if you're interested in a particular neighborhood, you can click on this tool here and do a lasso or a rectangle, and then let me do a lasso, for example. So I'm interested in sort of, for example, in this neighborhood. So I do a selection, and it basically is selecting the census tracts, and you can see an updated population, housing units, group quarter, and voting age population, as well as the population by race. Everything is updated for the selection you made. So this is one way to do it, and I'll show the advanced way. I think this is what Stephen wanted me to focus. So this is, again, we have data by different layers. So census places, counties, school districts, and tracts. So here, if you go to the bottom, use location analysis. So you can click on location analysis. And again, if you're interested in a particular neighborhood, you can zoom in to that area and click on the lasso here, or you can use a point or a line. So I'm doing a lasso here and just randomly selecting a neighborhood that I'm interested in. And once I make the selection, you can see these tabs pop up. And once you click on them, so this is the block level data. So this is the lowest geography that census has, and the block level data is only available for the decennial census, which is produced every 10 years. The other tool that I mentioned, the regional demographic snapshot, has data, but the lowest geography for that data is a block group, which is larger than the block. So here you can see the total population, household population, housing units, group quarter, and population over 18. And you can also break down that by race and the occupancy status. So you see the cloud button here. You can download the data. Just simply click on it, and it will save a Excel file. So once you save it, click on open, and you will see. So this is basically the block ID, and you have information for each block that you have that falls within the area that you selected. So you have all the information on population. And the other way to do it is, so for example, if you're interested in a watershed, if you want to summarize data for a particular watershed, you can click on this widget here at the bottom, which says add data. So once you click on it and just type HJC watersheds, for example. So I see like a couple of maps are online. So I just click on add. Once I click on add and like maybe zoom out. So you will see different watersheds for within our region. And you, for example, you can click on it and you'll see that this is San Jacinto River Basin. And if you go to the, sorry, I'm hearing some echo. So if you click on the three dots here, and then on the three here, and Stephen, can you hear me?
It's breaking up again. I'm not sure if it's. he's recommending you disable your video.
Okay, let me. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, so once you click on it, still, you click on the dots here at the bottom and then set location. So basically what I did was I selected this watershed, and then you can see again these tabs popping up, and click on the block summary. So this is a big watershed, so it may take some time, but eventually it will include all the blocks within this watershed and provide the population data. Okay, so yeah, this is a big one, 1.4 million people. So as you can see, the data is populated, and since the blocks are very small, you don't see much area outside the area that you selected, outside the watershed, basically. So again, you can click on this button here and download the data for the watershed. So you have the population on your fingertips with this tool for any watershed that you want. Okay, so this is the base year 2020 data, right? So if you want forecast data for the watershed, so you can go back to our tools page and then select the growth forecast and click on the regional land use information system. So this is HJC's forecast, regional growth forecast, long range, which includes population forecast for 2045. And again, go to the layer list, just unselect this. And I'm doing the same thing, add data. I'm doing same HJC watersheds. But the lowest geography that we have here is either census tracts or traffic analysis zones. So let me add the words here. Then click on it. Same thing, click on the 3 dots here and set location. And then you'll see the census tracts. As you can see, the problem with this is, let's census tract. There are areas that are outside the watershed also are included. So we cannot cut the census tracts, so they have to be included. And here is the population data current, like 2018, and then we have population for 2045. Same thing with the households and jobs. So this is how you can get, if you want a forecasted population for your watershed, you can use this tool to get that forecast data. And let me again go back to the tools page. And I mentioned about more detailed demographic data, right? So if you click on census and you go to either the demographic snapshot or the demographic data explorer. So let me click on the demographic data explorer here. I just want to show what all information you have in here. So just click on I selected the census tract, and you can see the data we have, like population breakdown by age, number of cars, education, English, like language spoken at home, poverty, and all the other information. So you can, again, you can see the same widgets at the bottom. If you are interested in more demographic data for your watershed, you can click on the add button, type in watersheds, and do the selection as I showed before. So that's how you can get more detailed information on demographics with this tool. So I think that's all and all tools have a user guide. So if you click on this I button here, you'll see variable descriptions as well as user guide. So that's all. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pramod. Any questions for Pramod? All right.
Okay, great.
Any questions online?
I don't see any hands raised and nothing in the chat.
All right.
right, thank you, Andrea. I thought it was important to have Pramod come in just because we were talking about that geographic analysis and trying to plan for where we would want to do implementation. I think it's a valuable tool for us to use, but also if you're an individual watershed and you're concerned about a particular watershed, you might want that information too. And it's something that we can all easily access. So thank you, Pramod. So moving on to the next presentation, Cassidy Ince from Texas Forest Service is going to talk about their programs. And I was talking to Cassidy about forest implementation and those kinds of things for us. And she volunteered to present. And it brought to my attention just between this and between a lot of the change. And the city of Houston's going through a lot of staff changes. Harris County's going through a lot of staff changes, whereas the big has gone through a fair number of changes. That might be an opportunity for us to talk about what we do in relation to the big. And so I was going to start inviting members of the big to talk about what they do with their organization and what their organization does in their reflection of implementation. So I'm going to start trying to reach out to each of you as we go to these meetings in the future. Now we have 33 members, so that's a long time if we're going to do one a meeting. So we probably will be doing more than one per meeting, but a lot of the focus I'd like to see on that. And so I'll let Cassidy talk about the Texas Forest Service, both their urban and rural programs.
Thank you, Steve. Let me share my screen here. All right, howdy, my name is Cassidy Ince, and I am currently the Water Resources Forester in Houston. As Steve mentioned earlier, I am replacing Mac Martin, who is still with the agency and is serving as my alternate on this committee. And just like he just mentioned, we are still going through some staff changes too here in the Texas Forest Service. I have been in this position since December, and I'm still learning the ins and outs of it. And we also lost my supervisor, Shane Harrington. He has also accepted a new role in the agency, and they're looking to fill that position in the next upcoming months or so. So bear with us as we're still also going through some changes on our end. So just a little bit of history about the Forest Service. It was established in 1915. In November of 1914, W. Goodrich Jones helped work with other conservation leaders in Temple, Texas to create the Texas Forestry Association. They also lobbied to form a state forestry agency and to develop a statewide plan for forest conservation. And in doing that, they created a new state agency, and that is known as the Texas Forest Service, which is now known as the Texas A&M Forest Service. So how do we fit into the Texas A&M system? We often are asked if we are from Texas A&M, if we're all students, and we are not students anymore, although I am class of 2017. So Texas was the first in the nation to establish its state forestry agency as part of a land grant college. So we are within the system as our own entity. There's also 4 other states that have done the same, listed on the slide. I'm sorry, there's a little pop-up I gotta move here. And then we are one of 7 Texas state agencies that are headquartered in College Station and not in Austin. So we are located in College Station close to the university. So these are some of our missions that we fulfill as a land-grant university system. We have a call to serve, which is providing technical assistance, program delivery, and readily available, easily accessible science-based information. We have a duty to protect, providing protection against wildland fires and other all-hazard emergencies. The commitment to support, promoting statewide forestry-based economic development, the environment, and the well-being of the state. And the power of partnership, building partnerships and coalitions with other organizations that share our mission because we know we are stronger together. But our overall mission here is to provide statewide leadership to assure the state's trees, forests, and related natural resources are protected and sustained for the benefit of all. So our objectives have changed over the years. These are just a few objectives that were created whenever the Forest Service was established back in 1915. They mostly assisted private landowners in forest management practices and protected private forest lands against wildfires, insects, and disease. They provided public education in forestry and assisted in wood product development and improvement. They were mostly active in East Texas, where most of our timber operations are. But as y'all know, we are now statewide, and our objectives have changed just a little bit. Our current objectives, I've mentioned some of them already, but we provide technical assistance and program delivery. We do all hazard emergencies, so we respond to wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, any kind of natural disaster. We provide accurate science-based information, and we develop and build cooperative working relationships and promote statewide forest and woodland economic development statewide. So our employee makeup, we currently have over 500 employees and over 60 offices statewide. This picture was taken a couple years ago at our annual meeting that we used to have in person. I think this was the last one we had in person before the pandemic, and we switched to virtual, but it's the one time out of the year that we can all come together from all across the state. We work a lot together online and on fires and projects and stuff, but sometimes we don't get to see each other's faces for years. So it's a really great meeting to come together and see what everyone's doing around the agency. So here's a map of our current office locations. These do change from time to time, and it's constantly updated on our website. But as you can see, the green dots are our field office locations. The star indicates our headquarters there in College Station. But you can see how we have most of our offices located in East Texas. That's where all of our East Texas ops are. And then the offices going more towards the Panhandle and in West Texas, those are more of our fire operations. We don't have as many foresters located in those offices. So who works for us? We have district foresters who provide technical assistance to private landowners. They help manage local state forests. They write management plans. They install fire breaks. They respond to wildfires, and they help with timber harvest plans and things like that. Then we have some urban and community foresters, which out of our Houston office, we have two of them that some of you may be familiar with, Mickey Merritt and Matt Weaver. Mickey Merritt is actually transitioning into a new role as well. So he is limiting some of the work that he's doing now, but Matt Weaver is still present and very active in the Houston area. But those urban and community foresters do a lot of public outreach and city planning with organizations across local communities. They are ISA certified, so that means that they have their arborist certifications and can meet with landowners to talk about their trees and make recommendations, things like that. So we do have two of those available out of our Houston office. We also have oak, wilt, and stewardship foresters. Just like the urban and community foresters, they are certified arborists as well. Most of these guys are located in Central and North Texas, as that is where oak wilt is found and most prominent. They work with landowners to assess their trees for diseases and write management plans to prevent the spread or infection of those diseases. And they also do a lot of public outreach and put on workshops for those local landowners. So the water resource foresters, like myself, I will go into more detail about what we do in the upcoming slides, but there's 4 of us currently in the state. I'm located in Houston, and Jeff McFall is located in San Antonio. And then we have 2 water resource foresters in East Texas that deal more with best management practices and biology, things with like RCWs, endangered species, things like that. And then we have forest inventory and analysis foresters. So this is what I did previously with the agency for 4 years, and I'm still involved in the Houston FIA survey. This is a nationwide program implemented by started by the U.S. Forest Service, which allows us to go out to plots and gather data about tree species, size, canopy cover, fire fuels, land uses, things like that, so we can monitor how our forests are changing over time. And so these plots are on a 3 by 3 mile grid across the state. So they're all randomly selected. And we measure about 10% of those plots every single year. So it's on a 10-year rotation. And so we can see how things like urbanization and other land use changes are affecting our state forests and resources. Then we have our regional fire coordinators. These guys work with local departments, getting equipment and resources on fires and putting on trainings for wildfire prevention and working with landowners on how to prevent wildfires. So same with the WUI specialists, the Wildland Urban Interface specialists there. They also work on a lot of fuel mitigation projects and do cost assessments and process applications for landowners who are wanting to become more fire wise and prevent wildfire damage on their property. They also serve as public information officers on our local disasters. And then we have resource specialists. Usually they work under our foresters for assistance, but provide a lot of manpower on big projects, and they also serve as wildland firefighters. And as of 2019, I believe, everyone in the agency is now 25% emergency response. So everyone really works together across the departments to help each other be successful. And it's important to note too that we're not limited to the resources in the water resources program. We are able to reach out to our other departments for resources. So if there's ever any interest of bringing in some of these other people, like in our Houston office, I'd be more than happy to get them to come to some of the meetings or give some kind of expert information or advice on certain topics. So specifically the water resources, what we do, we focus on 3 main things: education, training, and technical assistance. As we are shifting with our new water resources coordinator coming in soon, we are redesigning our implementation plan and what our goals are and what we want our water program to look like in the state of Texas. So, but currently we are focused on education, training, and technical assistance. So education, we serve on local committees like this one to provide advice and information on different topics. We also provide information about water resources at events. Recently, my colleague Donna Work and I attended the Houston Waterworks Festival, and we were able to bring, it might be hard to see on y'all's end, but this water table in the picture, we were able to bring this out to show people how different land uses affect water runoff and erosion and things like that. So it was pretty cool to have some kind of hands-on display for the public so they can understand what it means, instead of, you know, you always hear about how urbanization is bad for our water system or for our forests, but they may not understand how. So it was pretty cool to see some people light up and enjoy that display. We also prepare publications and handouts for public use. Some of you may be familiar with our Blue Book. It's more relevant in East Texas and that's a guide for best management practices, mostly with timber harvesting on private land. But we also provide or prepare papers and flyers, informational fact sheets, things to hand out at different events. And then we also develop software and programs for public use, which I'm going to get into a couple of them here on the next couple of slides. So some of our geospatial applications, these can be found on our website, and I do have the link on another slide. I can also put it in the chat. But just a few that I'm going to talk about today is Map My Property, Plan My Land operation, our BMP mobile app, and My City's Trees. So just really quickly, Map My Property. This is just a screenshot. I'm actually on a fire assignment here outside of the Abilene Airport, so I just kind of pulled up the airport for an example. But as you can see, you're able to create a map of your property, and you can add labels. You can measure sizes of different things that might be found on your property. But this is just a way that landowners can, if they don't have a proper map of certain boundaries, whether it's property boundaries or some projects they have going on their property, they can use this in order to create a visual map of that. And you can also share this with you can export it as a PDF and share it with other people. So this is a useful tool we've used on some of our projects to map it out. Also Plan My Land operation. It's kind of like Map My Property, but with more options in it. And once again, I mapped the outline of just the airport area. And you can see it gives us the number of acreage, but one of the layers I have on is the soils map. You can look at things like construction limitations for haul roads and log landings, erosion hazard, things like that. There's all different sorts of layers you can add on to this. There's a watershed layer to see how many watersheds are on your property or your project area. And so, yeah, this is another very useful tool that can be found on our website. And then My City's Trees. So this is where all of our data can be accessed from the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program. I have Houston on here. When you select a city, and this only has data for participating cities. So some cities have not started participating in the FIA program, but thankfully Houston is. And you can pull up the information, how many acres, the size of the tree canopy, the percentage of tree canopy versus concrete, things like that. You can also see in the picture on the bottom, the top 5 species found in Houston. And remember, this is data coming from our plots. So this one says that the top 5 species found in Houston right now are Yopine, Chinese tallow, Chinese privet, loblolly pine, and American elm. So this is where we can access all of that data that we are gathering from our plots. And here's the link to the applications on our website. You can just go type in Texas A&M Forest Service on Google. It'll pull up our main page, and then we have a tab for data and analysis. If you click on that, then click on applications. It will take you to all of our available applications. And those were just a few. We have tons of them for all different projects and needs. So we also provide training. Our pro loggers training is held in Lufkin. This is an important training if you own land in East Texas. Also, if you're going to do any kind of logging operations, it's actually required for a lot of the sawmills we have in East Texas for these companies to have this certification. And at this training, they learn about best management practices, which are used to reduce the impact of their logging operations on the water resources found on the property. So that's a very important training that we put on. We also speak at riparian workshops put on by the Texas Water Resources Institute. These are from urban restoration, stream restoration trainings, and urban best management practice trainings. We give presentations that are more forestry related and how trees play a role in all of that. And then a new one that we just started is post-fire recovery training. And we actually just tested that out a couple of weeks ago. But we're always able to prepare new trainings and new presentations for specific categories or needs. So we're not limited to these topics necessarily. Lastly, we also provide technical assistance. We provide assistance to landowners and other organizations in relation to erosion control and water quality issues. We do tree plantings, which I will talk about. Our Houston Arbor Day we did in January. Actually, this picture is from there. And we're able to provide manpower. Like I mentioned before, our departments work together all the time and share resources to get our projects done. And actually every single person in this picture that you see volunteering is actually a full-time wildland firefighter. So we were able to grab some of them, thankfully, before the fire season kicked off, and they were able to help us out with this project. So lastly, I have the Houston Arbor Day, which took place in January. This was a big planting we did at the Kickerillo Mission Preserve in Northwest Houston on the Cypress Creek watershed. This was a project that was put together by multiple partners I have listed on this slide, including HJC, so thank you. And this was actually Mac's last project before I came in. So he was on the planning committee for this, and he was the main project manager for TFS. So I was able to see, more of what we do and meet some of our partners that he has been working with previously while he was in Houston. But this project was planting to improve water quality and to promote flood mitigation in the Cypress Creek watershed. We had about 222 volunteers show up, and we planted 7,100 trees. As you can see, maybe the top picture in the background, there's some new apartments that went up, and they did a lot of tree clearing. There's absolutely no trees on the other side of the creek right now, because that land is actually owned by the apartments, but hopefully in the future we can do some planting on that side as well. But this was a really big project. Lake Houston, which the Cypress Creek feeds off into, is set to become the largest surface drinking water facility in the US. So projects like this are very important to make sure we can to make sure that we can improve our water quality and lower the effects of flooding in the area. And just right quick, Precinct 4 actually posted a drone video of the project area. So this is actually one side of it. This is the basin area where half of the trees were planted, but you can see the drone will move here. There we go. You can kind of see how all those little mounds are dirt and holes where trees were planted. So it was a pretty big project, and we had a lot of volunteers involved and a lot of partners, and it was very successful, and we look forward to doing more projects like that in the future. Let's see. All right, there's my contact information if you ever want to reach out or have any questions. Like I said, I'm still getting settled into this position, so if I can't personally answer your question, I will make sure to get you in touch with someone who can, but feel free to reach out to me for anything.
All right, thank you, Cassidy. Any questions for Cassidy from the audience? Anyone online?
I don't see any in the chat.
All right. Well, thank you, Cassidy. We look forward to having you on the big and for updates in the future.
Thank you.
Let me get back to sharing my screen and presentation. Momento. We're just about done. We're a little bit over time, but we are getting through some of the technical things issue-wise. Oh, I did not go to the right spot. Sorry. There we go. So we're at the last task or last part of our items, just upcoming events for folks to respond to. Just to let you know, we've got a variety of things happening this summer. If you're on vacation or not, please join us at some of these meetings or events, such as the Big Creek TMDL meeting in Rosenberg, covering Big Creek, Caney Creek, and TMDL and Sargent. And Clean Waters Initiative Outreach just came out. I think the announcement today for June 16th, coming on outreach and education. Texas Stream Team will be training event in Pearland, Texas. Parks and Natural Areas, July 11th, 2022. Bring Back Main Street, July 26th, 2022. And then the fall meeting is October 25th, 2022. The big, and these are just things that are happening at HJC. If there are things happening in your organization you want to let folks know about here at the big, feel free to chime in at this moment. Anything happening at CEC? No. Tom, you know anything about Galveston Bay Foundation? Anything? Nope. How about online? Anybody online have anything to share in terms of events or happenings?
Bayou City Water.
Sorry, yeah, Galveston Bay Foundation has a number of events coming up. I'll put a link in the chat.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. Rachel?
Bayou City Waterkeeper has an event on Saturday at Armand Bayou Nature Center.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Stephen, it's Camila Biaggi. As you know, tomorrow is our second day of our 2-day webinar series for the our 12th annual OSSF webinar. Sorry guys, I'm having afternoon brain, but yeah, tomorrow is day 2 of that from 8 to 12.
And just to be clear, you didn't have to participate in the first one to participate tomorrow.
Yes, sir, that is correct. You're more than welcome to join for tomorrow's event, and we will be awarding CEUs for those that participate in a couple of weeks later, for those that do have licenses and are looking for that.
Great, thank you, Camila. Anybody else? Well, I thank you for your time and your patience, and we went over just a little bit. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and look forward to getting out some new information to you related to the Iplan as well as the annual report as we move into the summer. I thank you for your attention. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.